Good morning. We're working on Gem Wars. We're going to be implementing reconnects for players. We currently have it set up for short-term reconnects, so all the TCP messages get queued and then sent out across the pipe when you reconnect. But if you completely close the game and you reopen it, we need to have a state of the game, which is stored in Mongo, and then we pull that out. We recreate the BLLs. We're going to then create view models from that and pass them over to the game. So to get started this morning, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my database has all the fields correctly populated. So if I look at my game, I've modified my actions just a little bit. So now an action drawer has a match player board before it. And that's because this fill drawers needs to have a match player instance on it. And then the fill drawers does not. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do a migration on this. I'm going to say add migration. And for this one, we want to say that this is a removed match player board from action drawer fill drawers. Okay, we'll let that migration build and then we'll push it out to the database. It may error, we may need to recreate the database, but that just takes a moment. I'm sorry, it's too hot in here today. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do this one here. We can turn it up just a little bit and then we can turn on the air. Okay, now we're going to do a update migration on this. Update database, sorry. Let's make it a little hotter. All right. So that's done. And so now what I can do is we can run our backend. Like that. And we're going to take a look at the database now. Let's make sure that the game runs. And this time everything is coming off the server, except for the gems and the so lines calculate the score and the number of gems, but then the client right now is reporting them, so we need to change that. So we're going to go to practice. And here, this timer is coming off of the server. Each of these player moves are calculated on the server. And same with the moves that I'm playing here, including the refresh of the pieces. Everything is being logged into SQL while we play. You can see the boards are shifting correctly. And these games can go on quite a long time when you're playing in the practice mode. So we're good to go there. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the database and we're going to look at each of the tables in here. So under my players, that looks fine. Underneath my actions, action drawer, action piece, action match, player board. So here's one for play piece. match player board instance. So let's delete the database so that we can be sure we're starting with a fresh one. Come back over here into the back end. We'll stop it. Set the web API as the startup project. And we'll do a remove all my migrations, do a add migration, call it a init. Okay, that's going to update the database. When I look at my front end, underneath my username panel, this doesn't look great right now when we're at this screen resolution. So we're going to fix this. If I look at my panel, this text, we're going to make this go from 0.5 to 0.75 to 0.8. My username input looks fine. Could I increase the height? Would that make it look better? Not really. And then finally our submit button, which we want to put at 0.35 to 0.15 and 0.35. And then also we want to set the width here to go from 0.35 to 0.65. This is a little too tall. So when I look at this as a landscape, it looks good too. Let's shift this text up just a little bit. Like that. Okay, so now we're going to start the game. It's not going to post any of the objects out to the server yet. Doesn't look like I started the back end. So this is done. We can do a project, multiple startup projects, and kick that off. And click on reconnect. All right, ask me to input my username, so I do that. Click submit, it'll register me, and then log me in. So now on the front end, underneath my title manager, I need to post out all of my objects here. Which will take just a second. And we've posted everything out. So now we can turn that off and we're good to go. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and click on the practice versus AI. Go ahead and start adding in some pieces here so we generate some data. Looks like it just gave me an error on my go to next board because it's saying my match players are null. Let's try it one more time, see if that happens again or if that was just a one-time deal. I mean, I know we're going to have to debug that. Same deal. So let's take a look at what's happening here when we go to the board. Oh, that's because the game is still playing on the back end. Oh, and that's probably what the failure is on again. So let's restart. We have to restart the back end because the game is still playing on the server. And when we disconnect, it continues to play. And then when we start the game back up, it needs to download all of the additional data that it can get. Okay, here we go. When we look at this, my match, we have one. We have my match players. And we have a board next. So it looks like it's resolved. Oh no. So we're going to try it again. Have to restart the back end every time right now. Well, sometimes it locks up here. So we'll give it just a second. If it locks up, we'll have to close and restart it, but that only takes a second. Something about using those asynchronous threads. So if this continues, I'm just going to... That's what you get by using asynchronous threads correctly. Yeah, the Unity is still kind of buggy when I run anything on the back-end thread, on a background thread. But it's totally horrible if I use it on a coroutine and keep it on the main thread. Oh no, they're being used correctly. They're absolutely being used correctly. We need to restart the game. Yeah, I do a tremendous amount of ASP.NET backend programming, so I'm very confident in my asynchronous threads. And then I also have to use, a lot of times I have to use little bool indicators and store it in the class and then have it deal with the response of the asynchronous calls in the update method. Yeah, I know you do. I've been watching you since ever. That's awesome, Mystic Soda. Thanks for speaking up. How are you doing this morning? Hey, that's good. Let's go ahead and finish these lines up. That's good. One more. Now that looked like that kicked through correctly. So a little unsure why it couldn't find them. Two more to the next board, one more to the next board. There it is. Failure again here. So I'm gonna revert my changes that I made this morning because that should resolve it, and then we're gonna work on our auto reconnects. So when I look at the changes that I made this morning, just a few. We'll remove these. We'll scrap all of these. We're going to go back in here. We need to kill the database. We need to do a new migration here. Just do a update database. What I meant is you might have some thread or something along the lines that you aren't maintaining right. That's happened to me even though I don't work with multiple threads very often. So they're all managed in the base code. So anytime that there is a asynchronous call. So for example, what I think is causing the problem is the TCP server because it has some disposal methods on it. But this ever started happening once Unity changed to the 2020. Okay, back in the back end, that's done. We can now set my startup projects. Click run. Start our game. Okay, we'll fix that a little bit. Come on. Input a username, let it register, go into the game, title manager, underneath start, underneath update. Yeah, it should be okay. I've actually double checked and triple checked all of the events and the asynchronous calls just to make sure that I don't have a performance leak. I should do a profiler on this. How do I, in the profile, I want to clear it. Okay, so we'll go to the practice. There it is. Speaking of logging up, I had to completely reinstall Windows last week. I updated Windows and like 2 days later, just started randomly always restarting instead of shutting down. Eventually it died completely. Yeah, I'm glad you have the extra hard drive. That sucks. I had a crazy thing happen to me at work where Windows just was on a continuous crashing loop. Explorer was. I couldn't open my files. I couldn't do a thing. It was crazy. I wonder if there's something going on with like updates, recent updates that aren't working correctly or something. We're just going to go to the next board and check it because I ran this for 2 hours yesterday by itself. It ran great. Okay, here's our go to next board. We got our match players. We create our draws. And we start everything up. Looks good. Yeah, I know, right? People have been complaining a lot of the 2020 updates in like April. That makes sense. Because I was like I was flabbergasted with that problem yesterday. I could not figure it out. I was calling IT. Here we go to the next board. And you can see now it's working correctly. So it was just something to do with those changes that I last made. Let's recreate my changes that we made here on the title, which was on the username panel. And this was really easy. We changed this text to go from 0.55 to 0.85. And we changed the submit button to go to 0.35, 0.65, 0.3, 0.15. Like that, okay? So let's work on our reconnect, shall we? So what I need to do is on the back end, when I'm looking at the game, let's go ahead and stop it. And in my business logic layer for the game manager, I have this convert VM to BLL. So we're going to have another one of these, which is convert game BLL to VM. And we're going to return my game VM. And instead, I'm going to be passing in my game BLL. Like that. So in my single player, let's start there. We're going to have it right here as a convert game BLL to VM asynchronous. And we're going to pass in a game single player BLL and then a game single player VM. Now in this, we don't need this game single player cast. Like that. Okay. So when I look at this, for converting my VM to my BLL, because the VM we're going to be storing on Mongo. Hey, Sound of Gaming, welcome back to the channel. It's good to have you with us. How are you doing this morning? This is my work PC. I'd be pissed. Yeah, this is wild. So here, I was definitely heated. I'm good. How are you? I'm doing great today. It's good to hear you're doing fine. That's great news. So in here, we're looking at each one of my games. We're creating each one of the player pieces. We create the player. For each one of my rounds matches, we create them. We create the boards. That looks okay. So let's first look at my game single player BLL. This thing is going to have a couple of pieces on the generic, which are this game DTO. So we're going to make a new game single player VM. And in this we have a game DTO, which is going to be my game.gameDTO. A game type, which is my game.gameSO.gameType. An ID, which is game. This is just a game.id. My VM type is a game. And then we have these lists of game player responses, players, round responses, and tiers. So let's do tiers first. For each var tier in game.tiers, I want to make a new tier VM, which is going to have a looking at my library. I think it's just a tier DTO. And so this is a type of tier DTO. So you can actually just copy this right across as game.tiers. Okay, rounds are VMs. So we're going to have a var for each var round in game.rounds. I want to have a round VM equals a new round VM, which is going to have a ID, a tiers, and a VM type. So the ID is going to go round dot. You should have a round DTO, so it's just ID. Tier color chances rounds are DTOs, so that's a round.tier color chances round.gem chances. Now this round is actually a round single player VM. Geez, I've never seen a gigantic class with so many constraints at once. Yeah, I've got tons and tons of generics in here. So like if you look at my generic here, it's got this many in here. The match generic, match set generic, round generic, game instance, game generic, board VM, game VM, and then our actions. And this is so that I'm able to have just very clean classes with overrides for the specific behaviors. Oh, I wanted to ask you a C# question this week in class. We were talking about loops, breaks, continues, return came up. Break breaks out of the loop completely. Continue goes to jump the next iteration of the loop. And return by itself exits the loop function. I get, return, and break next up. You got it right. Break will break out of the loop that you're currently in, and then continue will go to the next iteration of the loop, and then return will return the function with whatever return parameter you're passing in. No problem. You've got it, man. You got it. Down here, looks like I forgot to change these things out. So now I also have a round, which is a round DTO. And then finally a match set response, which is my VMs, right? So we want to have our round DTOs, or round VMs, equals a new list of round single player VM. And then down here we're going to do a round VMs.add my round VM. So now we need to do our match set responses. For each of our match set response in round.matchsets, I want to have a var match set VMs equals a new list of match set single player VM. And we're going to do a match set VMs.add, a new one of these. Thank you. Return, just like break, also breaks out of any loop switch conditional. The difference is that it exists. This exits the scope of the function completely. That's right. Okay, in this we're going to have my ID, which is matchset.id. My match set equals matchset.matchsetDTO. My VM type, which is a match set. And then my match responses, which will be a new one that we need to add in. And down here, we're going to say that this is my match set VMs .toArray. This here is going to be your round VMs.toArray. So now we need to have our match responses. Our match VMs equals a new list of match single player VM. And then for each one of my match in my match set.matches, I want to do a match VMs.add a new match single player, and we're going to have an ID as my match.id, my match players, my match, my VM type, and my board responses. Match players are DTOs, so if I look, we have those as BLLs, so that won't work. But I can do a match.matchDTO. And so now what I want to do is a new match player VMs equals a new list of match player VM. That's right. Nope. you have it as a match player instance DTO. So in that case, I think I can do match.matchplayers.select my match player DTO.toArray. And my board responses are board VMs equals a new list of board single player VM. And then for each one of my board in match.boards, I want to do a board VMs.add a new board single player VM, and we're going to have a board which is board.dto. My draw pieces, my ID is the board.id, my match player boards, my tiers again, and my VM type is a board. So this one is a board.tiers color chances. And this is board.tier gem chances. We can say that this is my board VMs.toArray. Mystic Soda, thank you, says the Sound of Gaming. So if you have a for loop, if you do a break, you leave the loop. But if you do return, you leave the loop in the function itself. Yep, that's right. Okay, so now draw pieces are VMs, match player boards are DTOs. So this is a board.matchplayerboards.select my DTOs in here .toArray. Making progress, we're almost done now. This needs to be a match VMs.toArray. Okay, so we need draw pieces up here. For each var draw piece in my board.draw pieces, I want to have a draw piece VM. And we're going to have my var draw piece VMs equals a new list of draw piece VM. And this is going to be a draw piece DTO. My ID is draw piece.id. My piece VM is we don't know it yet. And my VM type equals a draw piece. And we want to do a draw piece VMs.add this. Oh, another question, says Sound of Gaming. If I wanted to dabble in multiplayer networking in Unity, what would you say would be the best resource to get started? I know UNet was deprecated, but I want to get something basic to see what the process is like. Phaser, I think a lot of people use Phaser for multiplayer, and that manages authentication for you. The biggest problem you're going to have is authentication authorization. I use Identity Server 4 for that with a custom grant. And then once I get the token, then you can kind of come up with your own multiplayer. But I think Phaser is the great way to get started. I know networking itself is a task and a half, or a task and a half. So if you want to do it all yourself, definitely the first thing you should do is pick up Identity Server 4. That will issue your tokens to your clients. And once you have the authorization set up, doing the multiplayer itself is kind of another little task which you have to be pretty creative. I have a TCP package out there called tcp.net that I'm using in this game, so feel free to check that out. It's on GitHub and NuGet. So if I look at my draw piece, it's got a couple of things, a piece BLL, and that's it. So we're going to say var piece VM equals new piece VM, and we're going to pass in my piece DTO. my blocks block gems. Okay, so you don't have all these. We need to get these right here. So what I want to do is I want to say using a var context equals a new application database context. And we're going to pass in the globals for it. And we can steal them from here. And so now this if I look at how I'm creating a piece, each one of the block BLLs has the individual types. So where I create the piece in the data access layer, this one, where you're creating your VM, these are specific instances, which means down here, if I look at my block BLL, it's got a block gem. Yeah, so we're going to do this. Is I'm going to say var block gems equals a new list of block gem. Is it an instance DTO? And a gem instance DTO. And now we're going to do a for each var block in your drop piece.blocks. I want to do a block gem DTOs dot add my block dot. So we want to say if my block dot block gem is not equal to null, then we want to do a block gem DTOs dot add my block dot block gem DTO. If my block dot gem does not equal to null, then we want to do a gem DTOs dot add my block dot gem DTO. So my block gems are block gem DTOs dot to array. My gems are my gems dot to array. My VM type is a piece, and my ID is a drop piece.piece.id. This is a gems DTOs. One thing you should be careful of is inside a function, when hitting a return statement, any code after it will not be executed. That's true. Even if it's a Oh, it's photon. It's photon. Thank you. Not phaser. Photon. You're right. Thank you. And then this is my piece VM here. And then this is my draw piece VMs.toArray. Okay, so we're making progress on this. But there's a problem. Because let's step through these really quick. When I look at my game VM, we've got these rounds in it, and no logic in here. Just an update and a send. And then if I look at my round, no logic again. Look at my match set. No logic, no private variables. When I look at my match, there's a reason for my madness. I've heard of both. Yeah, phaser.io is a game engine for browsers that you can use. Now that I have that, okay, there we go. Let's match set doesn't have any logic in it. We're going to look at match. That's got a game, a start game type, nothing important that we need to store. If I look at my boards, though, we need this grid. So let's make this grid here. I'm going to make a new folder in here called View Models. And I'm going to have one which is called Board Server VM. And what I want to have on this is we're going to make it a type. It's going to be a type of board VM. Just a second. If I look here, good, yeah, that's right. And we want this to be a base VM. Geez, your mic became loud suddenly. Yeah, I turned on my shotgun mic in addition to the Cavalier mic, so hopefully it's a little bit better. I can turn it down just a little bit. That should be better. Okay. And we want this to be do I want this to be abstract? Let's start with an abstract. And then we're going to need to have a board multiplayer VM, board server multiplayer VM. Which is a board VM. And then we also want to have a board server single player VM. Which is a board single player. Okay. So on this, I want to have a new array. which needs to be an array of these block BLLs or block DTOs which have positions on them. So what you can say is this is going to have an I collection of block DTO, and we're going to call this grid. So now, when I'm looking at my ephemeral data that I've created here, this is your board VM. And I want this to also have on it a board VM. And that means that we're going to need to make a copy of these VMs in order for this to work correctly. Or you could extend them. So let's do that. I'm just going to do this, and then I'm just going to extend my board single player VM. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this one. Which will be a board multiplayer VM. It's just called a board VM. Okay, so now that you have those two, when you are creating this on the server, this is a board server single player VM. And you can say your grid here is on your board BLL, we're going to have a new public block BLL called grid single dimension. And you're going to have a blocks equals a new list of block BLL. And then for y goes to my grid.getLength of 1. For x goes to my grid.getLength of 0. You want to do a blocks.add my grid of xy. And then down here you want to return your blocks.toArray. So this is going to be board.grid single dimension. And we want to select the block DTOs.toArray. Hey, great gamer. Welcome back to the channel. How are you doing today? It's good to have you with us. Okay, that looks good. Block gem, we don't have anything. We don't have anything for my game players. We don't have anything separated. Okay, so we're on game players now. So we're going to do a for each var game player in my game.gamePlayers. These are VMs. So So we're going to have a var game player VMs equals a new list of game player VM. I'm good. You too? I'm doing very well today, thank you. Glad to be streaming, glad to get some stuff done here. Game player VMs.add. We're going to add a new VM here, which is going to have drawer responses, a game player, a ID, and the view model type is a game player. So we'll call this game player VMs dot to array. Good stuff. Yeah, we're working on the multiplayer. We have everything working on the server, so all the logic is being handled on the server, except for the display of gems is still being calculated from server-side objects. So I'm going to make that change. And we're working on the reconnection right now. So if you reconnect and you're still in the game, it will just start queuing the TCP messages and then send those in one bulk message when you return. And if you actually close the game down, that's what we're writing now. So it will re-download the whole game off of what we're going to store it on is probably a Mongo server. So now we have these drawer VMs. There's a new list of drawer VM. Hold on, I'm missing something up here. No, you're not. Okay. And so now for each one of my drawers in gameplayer.drawers, I want to do drawer VMs.add, and it's going to be a new drawer, which is going to be a action, which comes from your drawer dot I don't think we need the action anymore. The drawer itself, which is the DTO, the ID, the VM type, and a piece VM. So we can just steal this. This is going to be a drawer.piece.blocks. We're going to add them. And then this is going to be a drawer.piece.piecebdto, drawer.piece, drawer.id. No, this is a drawer.piece.id. And then we can dump that here as a piece VM. Now we don't have this one. But I don't think it matters. If I look at my drawer VM, my drawer BLL, here we can add in a action drawer purchase draw BLL. Say action drawer purchase draw with a private set. And we can pass that in as a an optional parameter, like that. Looking at this, we've got one implementation here in purchase piece. This is where you're setting your action. So in here, we're going to have a public virtual void set action purchase draw. We'll move this down here. Like that. So now you can do a drawer bll.set action to be my action. Let's look for all the rest of these. This one is in convert game VM to BLL. Second. An action was being held where in the drawer in the draw VM. So if my drawer.action does not equal to null, then you want to say drawer bll.set action to be drawer.action. Now this one wants a BLL. So we're going to change this to be a DTO. Like that. And we also want that to be on the single player. Where our drawer is being set. Here, if my drawer.action does not equal to null, then you want to do a drawer bll.set action to be my drawer.action. Okay? So down here at the bottom, this now comes from drawer.action. And then we're going to add this here as a drawer vms.toArray. The last one that I have here are players. These are being just a player DTO. If I look at game.players, yeah, all we're going to do is a game.players.toArray. Bro, is this a multiplayer game? Yes, it is. It's going to be a little bit like TFT with the ladder. Decay Flames, how are you doing? Thank you so much for that follow. If you have any questions, what I'm working on, don't hesitate to pop them into the chat. This should do it. So now we can convert it one way, and then we can convert it back. So I'm going to move this convert game BLL to VM. And I need it also in my multiplayer. And we're just going to change all these to be multiplayer. And now we're going to check to make sure everything works. This is just a board VM. Like that. This one doesn't have these because it's multiplayer. And that should be it. Okay, so that's done. So let's test it. What I want to say is on my connection event, where we set the connection to be null, well, the thing about this is that it doesn't know the game ID here that the player is in. Because we're going to need to get that game ID too. So what I'm going to do is on player, I really want to have a game current on here, but I don't know if I want that to be because you have game players already. So you could do a bool here called is game completed. Which means that on your DTOs, no, we don't care about that there, but on my data access layer, you have a request game. We're going to need to have a public virtual asynchronous task called update game. And the only thing I want to have here is the ID of the game, and the bool is completed. So we're going to do a var game equals await my using a var context equals a new application database context. We're going to pass in the globals. And we're going to do an await context.games first or default x where my ID equals ID and it's active. And then if my game does not equal to null, then I want to say game.isCompleted equals is completed. game.timestamp equals date time.utc now. We're going to do a context.entry of my game, set the state to be modified. And then we're going to do a return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. Otherwise, you're going to return a false. Now we're actually always passing my context here like this. And then we can move this to the interface. So now when you are playing in single player, no, it's in your generic, when you have a on move placed, you have a check for game over. Here, and then here you want to say await data access layer dot update game to be the match dot match set dot round dot game dot I dot game DTO dot ID. So instead here you're going to pass in the A. You can actually cast this as a like that. And we're going to say that this is completed as true. And you're going to say your context. We're going to add in the application database context here. Turn this into an asynchronous check. Like that. So now when you first connect to the game, in your payload, we want to have a bool for is in game. Okay. And so here we're going to have a new function in my game data access layer. And it's going to be called a task of a GUID, task of a bool, hold on. We're going to call this a read current game. Read player current game asynchronous. And we're just going to pass in the ID, which is the player ID. We're going to say is player currently in game asynchronous. So on the payload controller, we can say is, now we need to have a different data access layer in here for the iGame data access layer. We're going to have a protected read-only iGame data access layer called game data access layer. And this is now my game data access layer is player currently in game of my player.id. So on the front end, if you are currently in game, then it's just going to not show anything. And then when you connect to TCP, when you connect over TCP here, and you set your connection, now you're going to say we're going to call this a read player current game asynchronous. And this is going to be a game VM, because I don't know which type it is. We could even just do this as a game DTO. So this is a var player game current equals await my data access layer dot read player current game asynchronous of my player.id. If my player game current is not equal to null, and your games doesn't contain the key of the player game current.id, now you want to load the game from Mongo. So when I look at my Mongo database, I have a AWS Dynamo service, which we're going to inject here. Like that. And I'm going to have this as a protected read-only AWS Dynamo service. Okay. So when we have my check if game over, nope. When I have my disconnect, I want to say if my game.game players, and when we look at this set connection, we're going to just change this for a moment. Because I don't want to enqueue any of these things for now. I'm only going to be checking the, and we're going to add in here Rob fix this, okay? Because if your game players don't have any where your player does not equal to null and your player.connection does not equal to null and your x.player.connection.connected does not equal to null, client does not equal to null, and your x.player.connection.client.connected so if there isn't anyone in the game who is connected, then what I want to do is the AWS Dynamo service dot store document asynchronous of my game.id, and my document is going to be convert game BLL to VM of my game. This is an await. We want to do this as a to list. We want to do this as an await. Now this wants a Dynamo document. This is just an interface. We're going to put this in the Dynamo database table, and then I want to have a class that implements Dynamo document, and we can do this as a struct. Like that. Now, my ID here seems a little redundant. This ID is never being used. And the same thing here. I'm going to kill the dog in just a second. Okay, my ID is my game.id, and my value is a JSON convert.serialize object, and we're going to await my convert BLL to VM of my game. And then we also want to do a games.try remove my game.id and an out var nothing. Don't you think, does it help you to think stuff easier when you're thinking out loud for the stream? A little bit. That's called rubber ducky programming. I do find that it's easier to stay focused on the task, and because I have the doors closed and the lights on and stuff, there's less distractions. So we're going to test this one, and then when it gets connected, I'm going to say games.add, try add. This is my player game current dot ID. And now this is a new BLL, so it's going to be a await convert VM to BLL. So I'm going to do a aws.get document of my game.id. which is called player game current.id. And this needs to be of a type Dynamo document. And then I want to get my game VM equals JSON convert.deserialize object. And that's going to be a game VM, because I don't know what type of game it is, right? And that's going to be my document dot value. And then we're going to switch on my game VM. And if it is, oops, we're going to switch on my game VM.game type. And if it's free player practice, then we're going to say game VM equals JSON convert.deserialize object of type game single player VM of my document.value. Otherwise, it's going to be a game multiplayer VM. This is game VM. And then we also need to pass in my players and my context. So when I look down here at where I'm creating these players, we're going to do for each of our player in game VM.players, we have a player type. And now you're going to have a player BLLs. And here you're going to say player BLLs dot add a new player BLL, which is going to pass in my player DTO, my connection, and then my TCP server. Same thing here, except this one is null. We need to pass in the connection here. So if my player DTO dot ID is equal to my player dot ID, then we're going to add this player here as a args.connection. This is a GVM. Just a second. So if the game doesn't contain the current game, so I really want to do this as an abstract, okay? So I'm going to do a protected abstract, and we're going to say void add existing game or something like that. This needs to return a GVM, which is my game view model. And then this is a game instance DTO. We're going to say add existing game from Dynamo. If my player game current does not equal to null, and that doesn't exist, then you want to do a games.try add. We're going to say var GVM equals add existing game from Dynamo of my player game current. And now if my GVM does not equal to null, then you're going to do a games.try add my GVM.id and my GVM. Like that. And so now we want to do my add existing game from Dynamo. Protected override GVM add existing game from Dynamo. I'm back here, says Great Gamer. Playing Gem Wars now, it's not going so well. Yeah, it's an old iteration right now, so I need to put up a new version because we have quite a bit different now. Shit. Like that, okay? So this actually needs to be asynchronous and a asynchronous task. We want to get my Dynamo document. This is just going to be a game single player VM. Now, if it is a battle, we're going to return null. And then now I can change this to be a here, oops. This one and a task. So here, I want to do a switch on my args.connection event type. Because if you're connected, that's okay. That should be okay. And then when you're disconnected, it stores. Okay, we're going to have a method we need to implement, 2 of them. This is the first one in the multiplayer BLL. We're going to reverse these. And now in my games, it says that this needs to have a Dynamo service. And then the same thing in the multiplayer. Up here in my TCP server, you have an AWS S3 service, but no AWS Dynamo service yet. It only needs credentials, so we can do a services.add singleton of an AWS Dynamo service and an AWS Dynamo service. Which means down here we should be able to do a options.get service AWS Dynamo service. Read player current game asynchronous. And this is going to be is in game does not equal to null. So here we need to have this new one called public virtual async task of a game instance DTO called read player current game asynchronous of a GUID for my player ID and my application database context. And so now what I want to do is I want to get my var I don't want to get all the game players. I only want to get the games that are currently active. But So we're going to do an await context.games, and we want to include my game player instances, and we want to only get the games where my game player instances has any where my player ID is equal to player ID and my is game completed is false, and anywhere where your t.active, and you also want to say and x.active. And then you want to do a order by timestamp. And then we want to get my first or default, asynchronous. If my game current does not equal to null, then you're going to return a mapper.map to my game instance DTO of my game current. Otherwise, you want to return null. Okay, this one's going to want to have context and context. And we'll rebuild it. We're going to delete the database. Like that. When I create my logic here for when we go to a new board, if it is active, it's here in set running. So when you're doing this, convert game to BLL, and you're looking at your boards, you can do a board BLL.set running. Where is this getting set?
This doesn't make a lick of sense. This doesn't make sense, what you're doing here. Why do you even have this is running? If I look, though, at my board, don't I want to just call dispose on them? Yeah. I don't think we ever need this set running. So we're going to call this set game. It looks like when you go back, we need to subscribe it. So when I look here, for each one of my boards, we're going to go for I goes to my boards.length.count. If my I does not equal to my boards.count minus 1, then you want to do a boards of I.dispose. And so now after you do that, we want to have my this is going to be called a var game BLL. And I want to do a AI event on AI movement event. And I want to do a here. We're going to do a game BLL.AI movement event plus equals to on AI movement event, and then your game BLL.AI purchase event plus equals to on AI purchase event. which means that the places where these are invoked we no longer need this or this. And then when you're disposing of it here in the connect, we want to have a protected abstract void remove game, and it's just going to be a GUID for my game ID. Which means that over here we're going to have a protected override remove game. And we're going to do a if you can remove it, then you want to do a game.ai event minus equals to on AI movement event, and same thing with the purchase event. And then we're going to have that same thing on the multiplayer one. All right, I think we're set. So when I look at my code first project, we have our init. When I look at the database, we need to create it. There it is. If I look at my games, we never got my new game is over. So we need to add a migration here. Added flag for when game is over. We'll do an update database. Okay, now we're going to set all my projects active. And when I look at my title manager, we're sending the data, which is what we want. Oh, not yet. So let me disable that. Let's see if it crashes. It usually does. Looks like we're okay. Give it a play. Sound Gaming says, I'm going to be heading out. See ya. Thanks for streaming and answering my questions. No problem, man. Make sure to check out the videos. Good to have you with us. And again, make sure you're active on Discord. Appreciate it, Sound of Gaming. It's always good to catch up. Okay, let's run the back end now. Reconnect it. It's going to ask me to log in or make a login like that. Now on this side of things, we're going to enable the data transference. Give it a second to post the data. Okay, we can turn that off. And now we can give that a run. So now when we disconnect and we reconnect, we're going to check to see what's going on the server, because it should serialize my game out. So when I do a open play, all right, that worked successfully. And on my create, now we're going to play like two pieces, disconnect, and now reconnect. This time on my server, we're going to get my current game, which we've received. We're going to add the game from Dynamo. So here's the document. We don't have anything for that ID. The reason that failed is because it never captured my disconnect. It never is detecting the disconnect from the client. So if I did a protected override on error event, never mind, it's coming from this one. So now we're going to have a public virtual void on error event, which is going to be an object for my sender, and a TCP error server auth event args of my GUID called args. We want this to be an asynchronous task. This one we want to await. And all we want to do here is a a console.writeLine called test, and then return task.completed task. This needs to go onto the base game manager. We're going to try it again. To do that, we're going to delete the database again. Okay, so now we're going to go up here and start my startup projects. We'll run it. On the front end. Okay, here we go. Leaderboard dev trying, submit it. Back over in here. Okay, we got my connection event. It's going to say that my player game current is null. Looks like it's giving me two of these, one for connected and one for connecting. So we'll clean this up. But for now, that looks fine. Let's go ahead and change my title manager so we post our data. Okay. Restart our backend. This time it logs in. We're going to join the game. Click on Open Play. This time as we go, when we disconnect, I'm not getting a disconnect event. Or an error event. Okay, so we're going to need to look at tcp.net. So here's the error. Unable to read, forcibly closed. If I look at tcp.net from my server auth, it's listening for messages. Here. Here's the error event. It looks like it's always reading. So let's test it on my test server and client. It's never disconnecting. Okay, so what we're going to do in here is we're going to remove the NuGet packages. So now when I look at my server for my handler, when we are listening for white space, and we issue the client 2, it's listening for messages. Is it because it's never doing a peek? No, it's right there. Fires my event. It gets my identity, fires my event again, and here it is. Core networking is null. So in TCP server auth, you have a on error event. You don't even have it mapped. Try it again. We disconnect. We fire the error. Okay, so that means that in the back end, means it should be disconnecting just as soon as it does. Because it's trying to read the line, and then when the client gets destroyed, it's destroying this client, which on disposal Let's check it again. It's very much like when my TCP manager closed. It didn't dispose. So if I look at where we're storing these things, on destroy of your base game manager, we want to do this of the global manager. Public virtual void on destroy. We want to do TCP manager dot dispose. So we're just going to have a public static void dispose that does a TCP connection dot dispose. So now over in the game, I can do a update this table set is game completed to be 1. You can run the game again. Let it load. Here we go, is my connection. We do an open play. I don't know what this is all about. It's like it doesn't want to disconnect it. Oh, there it is. It's because we have a connection event it's waiting on. Okay, let's kill this. Now, I think it failed because we want to do that on the disposal of the, not the global manager, of the TCP manager. This one. See, when you kill it, you're stopping your connection and waiting for this to end. Which means we should be able to kind of break on this. Come on. It might take as much as 2 minutes for this to connect. Give it just a second. There it is. Give it a run. Probably want to set this again. So it never did the disposal on TCP manager. Was it not online? Because this should be getting disposed here. Okay, let's go ahead and do a open play. And then I stop it. And now we get my stop connection. We try to disconnect. It says connected as false. But on the back end, neither got a callback for an error. So what we're going to do is a little fun little trick here. We're going to add an existing project called tcp.net. Or not. That just caused major issues to my project. Where's the solution? Try opening that again. This time we're just going to add one thing at a time. So we'll start with the core project. We'll add in the server project, which is, I think, all we need. And then in this, I can remove tcp.net. Which is here. We'll get a couple of errors now. Where's the listening thing? We have like a listening to messages somewhere in here. It's in the handler. Let's go ahead and run it. It's going to fail. Tell me I need to add my references. This needs PHS networking in it. All right. That's now running. We can run the front end. Let's run our query here. Run a game. It never fired on my disconnect. Reader, if I look at my connection, client says that it's still connected. So if I did a if connection.reader.peak is greater than 0. Let's try it again. Weird. Try it again. It's really odd. Try it again. Maybe it's failing on all that weird stuff I added in. Seems like it's failing. Before it's getting there. Yeah, it's failing before it gets there. So let's try it one more time. No games. No games. On your server auth, you have this message event. You're not even connecting now. I mean, it eventually errors, but it takes a real long time. So up here on the update is where you probably should be sending these. Give it just a second here. What's odd is that it's... We're going to try something else in a second. Okay, here we go. We click on Open Play. We are sending my message here. It acted like it received it that time. Try it again. Okay, we click on the open play. TCP manager sends it. Now it's not being received. All right, I had to take a break. I'll be back in 20 minutes. Any questions? This is a great time to pop them in the chat. We're going to continue with this when we come back, and I'll see you in just a little bit. Thanks so much.